Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We have something very exciting to share today. We are starting a forgiveness series, and today will be part one, which we titled Why Bother? And we'll get into that. So, we're really excited about bringing a lot of really good information that is pertinent to probably everyone on the planet. So, we'll get into that in just a minute. Hi, Jamie. How are you? What's happening?
Good, Paige. I'm doing well. I'm excited for this topic, and I'm excited for the series that we're doing. So there will be multiple parts of this series, guys. So take a look if you are looking for forgiveness information. This is something that's really come out of Paige's her experience in recovery, and she wants to bring it to all to share. I think it's absolutely an advanced thing in recovery, but it is a major game changer, much like the reparenting work that we talk about a lot like some of the other spiritual practices, acceptance and detachment. But forgiveness is multiple layers, right? There's forgiveness in general, right? The act of it, and then there's forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others forgiving us or not. What is all of these layers of forgiveness exist, and they need to be talked about in recovery because it's a barrier.
Right. Yeah. Well, so that leads right into why in the world would we be talking about forgiveness on a food recovery podcast? And Jamie kind of has already started in with the whys to that. And at first glance, it may not make sense, but if you take a beat, we understand that the addict is highly sensitive, and having this underlying simmering pain bubbling up below the surface is triggering and extremely stressful. In recovery, we work very hard at processing emotions for this exact reason. We don't need extra reasons to drive us to the food, because in food addiction, we have a propensity to turn to food for comfort. We want to use skills for comfort. After all, we live in a volatile world where people get hurt and they also hurt others. So forgiveness is a resource we really want in our tool bag. We want our tool bag to be very heavy with forgiveness skills. What about you, Jamie?
Yes, absolutely. I agree. For me, my family of origin, unforgiveness was a tradition in the family. Forgiving people who hurt members of the family, it just wasn't an option. It wasn't it once it was decided that person was on the outs, that was it. That we didn't talk about it. We didn't, revisit it. We didn't open it back up again. Grudges were held. In my Italian American culture, it's sort of like a rite of passage to have a grudge or a vendetta against someone. And the only time we talked about that person was not from a forgiveness perspective. It was from, look at how they wronged us, look at what they did, look at how we're hurting because of their choices. It wasn't something where we grew from it. So people who hurt or crossed family members were written off as persona non grata, and edicts were made about them. Like, we don't talk about them, we don't discuss them. Really, it was, I didn't, growing up in it, you don't know, because you're in it, you don't understand how dysfunctional it is. But unforgiveness drove the actions of my parents, my grandparents, in some cases, for decades. I also believe unforgiveness and the theme of forgiveness put my mom in an early grave. There's no, that and the processed foods and a lot of the other things that she was using food to deal with. My own lack of forgiveness drove my own food behaviors and choices over the years. Forgiveness of myself and others, as I said at the top of the show, has been the capstone work of recovery for me. But I just have so much left to do.
It's interesting because right before I hopped on this meeting, I was working with someone who was bemoaning, was very upset, really crying about the loss of a long-term marriage and the forgiveness that they had to do. And so we had a chance to talk a little bit about what forgiveness actually was. She kept using the word anger. I'm just so angry. at this person, but really what needs to happen is, well, we know anger is a secondary emotion, so
Yeah.
pain is what you're really feeling. And so
Right.
we had to work on what forgiveness is, what it looks like, and I was able to help her understand is what forgiveness is. It's acceptance of reality of
Mm.
what is happening now and letting go of things you cannot control. And when you are in relationships with other adults, other people, you can only control yourself. You cannot control whether they're going to show up for you, whether they're going to stay committed to you, whether they're going to love you the way you expect to be loved,
That's right.
whether they're trustworthy. You can't
Yeah.
control that for another person. So that's when then it's back on your shoulders to accept what's happening and letting go of things that you can't control, which I agree with that definition, that's definitely part of it. Once you accept the situation and see it for what it is, then you can begin the forgiveness process, whatever
Exactly.
that might look like. And I even spoke to this person about sometimes forgiveness starts with compassion for the person that has wronged you, because oftentimes they are altered in some way
Hmm.
because people aren't their true authentic selves when they're doing bad things. There's
Right.
something else going on.
Right.
So that really brought this person I was talking to tears about that tenderness of having compassion for someone that has hurt you so deeply. And
Mhm.
so we're going to get into that more too. But for me, it involves a lot of prayer also, and asking for my heart to soften and also
Yes.
to help me see things clearly. What do you think about the definition of forgiveness?
Yeah, I think that I like, I know when we were prepping this episode, we edited that a little bit, and I went back and, in my own growth, right? When I think about forgiveness, I think about what actions I can take. I think about acceptance. I think about letting go, or, just sort of detaching, right, from those things that I can't control. That's a big part of it, but also focusing on what I can control. Prayer is part of that, right?
Right.
Talking to God, having a spiritual connection, being able to ask for help. If you don't have a strong spiritual connection, can you ask for help from someone that you either are in a partnership with, that is ahead of you, maybe on the path a little bit. Maybe they're more spiritually grounded, or they have a practice in their life that you admire, and you can ask them for guidance, for help, how they would handle something. But for me, um, I go to God and ask for help. And so I really appreciate that you added that page. Um, so while forgiveness is a process, it's a lot like grief. This is what I'm learning. Forgiveness is not always linear. For me anyway, it sometimes is 2 steps forward, 1 step back,
Mm-hmm.
one more forward, 2 steps back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not in my time, right? I'll think, oh, I've forgiven this person, but it comes up again. And I
Mm-hmm.
realize that for me, it's in God's time, or the universe's time. It's not my time. And I really like that you, like I said, have added prayer, have asked for God to help soften our hearts, help us see clearly. Because I've learned, at least for me, I can't do it alone. I just can't.
Right.
Believe me, I've tried. So let's talk about what forgiveness is not. We said what forgiveness, the process is, but what is, not considered forgiveness. Forgiveness is not forgetting what happened, right? There's that old saying, we forgive but don't forget, right?
Mm-hmm.
So forgiveness is not implying the pain they caused was no big deal, or that,
Mm-hmm.
diminishing our experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not necessarily saying, oh, I forgive the person, so I'm not justified for feeling the way I
Mm-hmm.
feel. Those are separate issues. And forgiveness is not reconciliation. It does not mean that we need to resume the same level of access, the same level of trust we had, or the kind of previous attachment or relationship that we have with those people. In all cases, right? In some cases, it might mean reconciliation if there's changed behaviors on both sides,
Yeah.
right? But in general, it doesn't have to mean reconciliation.
Yeah. I agree. And part of forgiveness may mean changes in the relationship, like you're saying, whether it's boundaries or even relationships may have to end if abuse is involved, especially with
Exactly.
children.
Yes.
But we can get into that more later. Forgiveness does not mean being a doormat, though. That is the one thing I want to bring out. I definitely am under the philosophy that I limit exposure with those that have hurt me so that proximity to me definitely changes.
Absolutely.
It's a privilege to be close to me.
Yeah.
And if you're going to hurt
Gotta
me,
earn it.
then the proximity to me has got to be altered.
And that's an example, right? There's a lot of, with this part of the forgiveness talk, guys, there's a lot of talk about boundaries. And that's an example. What Paige just said is a beautiful example of a boundary. A boundary is not something that we slap on someone else and expect them to do things differently. A
Right.
boundary is, and we're going to do a whole episode on boundaries, a boundary is what we allow, what we either choose for ourselves or do differently for someone else, or allow someone else to interact with us differently, except AKA in access to us, right? So
Right.
if they have access to us, and then they've chosen to hurt us, or they've broken our trust or breached our trust, at that point we have to say, okay, they don't get the same level of access to me until they show altered behavior over a certain period of time. And it's that's where we talk about, it's sometimes 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because sometimes we do have to take a step back
Mhm.
from that person and limit their interaction with us. And that's why I said it doesn't necessarily mean reconciliation. I'll tell a story in a little while about, where I'm in the process of practicing forgiveness, but as much as I would love to reconcile, there's a person in my life I cannot reconcile with. It's too dysfunctional, too toxic. And it's something that it harms me to reconcile with this person. But it's a choice we make for ourselves, and it's a choice as we continue in recovery and we continue to heal, that we might see very differently as we heal. And I have been praying and asking God for a long time to help me see things differently about certain people in my life. And while I see them differently, it doesn't mean that I let them have access to me anymore.
Mhm. Mhm. I love that you brought up the point that forgiveness of other people, they don't always even have to know.
Exactly.
It's your journey. You can do it on your time frame. They may not even be involved.
That's right. That's right. And we don't have to, it's a gift we give ourselves, and we
Yeah.
can choose to share it with the other person if or when it's time, but many
Mhm.
times we don't.
Yeah, it may not even be a safety issue.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
when someone wrongs you somehow, you might feel certain that you'll never be able to get over it. I'm sure we've all felt that way at the time. Even after your immediate anger passes, you might continue to dwell on the betrayal instead of letting it fade into memory. It's pretty common to feel this way. I know I have felt that in the beginning, but not being able to forgive them can harm you the most.
Yes.
Forgiveness might seem challenging in part because it's often misunderstood. Is your initial feelings one of, I will never be able to get over this? I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, when that initial shock, shoots through your body, I'm like, I will never feel any differently than I feel
Right.
right now. The pain is so intense. There is a huge physical pain in your heart that comes from
Yes.
deep hurt and betrayal. It's
Yes.
not something easy to get past. I also think when you are in that deep devastation, you can't even imagine what this would be like to ever get over it, how it would even be possible.
Mhm.
What, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. It feels like a sucker punch for me when I
Yeah.
somebody betrays my trust or does something to erode trust in some way. And I'm no stranger, right? Unfortunately, that pain, I felt it a lot in my life. But I'm also very good at, when I feel it now, it's a less and less, thank goodness, because I'm much better at having better boundaries. But
Hmm.
I'm able to say, oh, there you are. Okay. I see you and I feel you, and and now I have tools that I can use to mitigate it, and realizing that it will pass. It
Yeah.
will pass and it will change, it will morph.
Yeah. I love that you made that statement between the connection between boundaries and less pain, that you've practiced boundaries. And as a result, there's less pain and
Yes. I
reaction
don't
deep.
allow those same people who hurt me, I don't allow them to have the same access to me anymore.
Right. Right. Because then we're giving power to them. Yeah,
Exactly.
I love that. So let's talk more about what forgiveness is. In reality, forgiveness simply means choosing to let go of your anger, hurt, and desire for vengeance.
Yeah.
You might accept that what happened is now in the past, recognize that people make mistakes, and begin cultivating compassion instead. And
Mhm.
by compassion, that means for yourself as well. So when we talk more, we're going to talk a little more about what forgiveness means to each one of us. So I, I've talked before that I'm almost 60. And when you're almost 60, you've had a lot of opportunities to practice forgiveness, or you're going to be in a heap of a mess of trouble as far as having any happiness in your life. It's changed over the years for me. I am now in a place that I like to say that for me, forgiveness means you don't wish them harm, but
Mhm.
you don't have to go to lunch either.
Right.
So if I just am in a place where I don't wish them ill, I think that's pretty big of me. Or in other
Yes.
words, I'm working towards being neutral when I think of that person. I may have some work to do in this area because I am very quick to cut off people that tick me off. It's a natural reflex. I don't want to have anything to do with them. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just being truthful
Yeah.
that it's just what my gut tells me to do. I'm sure it's a
Sure.
protective mechanism. And probably because I judge other people on how I would treat people, and some of the
Yeah.
things they do just astonish me. And my first reaction is, I would never do that to someone else.
Right.
And I don't want to be involved with people that are harsh to
Right.
me. Just don't
Right.
be, you can say anything you want to me, but you don't have to be harsh to me. So I'm not down for that. I don't tolerate that well. I don't
Mhm.
have a thick skin when it comes to that. What
No,
about you?
no, I'm just extremely sensitive. I always have been. And I'm also very empathetic. So for me,
Hmm.
it's the same thing. If I feel that somebody's treated me in a way that I wouldn't treat another person, I take a step back and I'm like, hey, wait a second, like that doesn't feel good, and I wouldn't make that
Yeah,
choice. Not everyone. I'm certainly no saint, but I also feel like um, there's a strong moral compass that I have inside of
that's
me,
it.
and I want to live close to that compass as possible, especially in this phase of recovery, right? Where I've been given so many chances to start again. And now I'm realizing that it's part of my amends to myself. It's part of
Mm.
my self-forgiveness process. It's part of my self-acceptance process to live close to my moral compass. So I'm very low tolerance of people who treat treat me in a way that I wouldn't treat them.
Yeah. And I think my idea of forgiveness has changed over the years with maturity. I think you have a broader perspective or a deeper understanding of life and how
Yeah.
humans operate, and we understand more clearly now, I think, as we age, how hurt people, and
Hmm.
how they feel, how they have been hurt over a lifetime can show up in ugly ways. And that's where the compassion comes in, folks. We're going to
Right.
talk about this more and more, the connection between forgiveness and compassion. When you can have compassion for people that are altered in some way, the understanding helps with the compassion.
Yes.
But I've also learned a big life lesson, and I call it the 3-day rule. It usually takes about 3 days before the intensity, the deep, deep intensity, starts to mellow a little bit. And I know I'm going to feel better, even though at the time I'm like, you'll never feel better. Yes, I will. No, you won't. Yes, I will. Give me 3 days. I'll show you. And so I may not feel great, but there's something, I think, just as humans, we're wired to de-escalate a little bit, because
Yes.
humans can't stay at that high pitched level for too long. We wear out.
Yes. Very true. Yeah, for me, like I said earlier, forgiveness is the pinnacle. It's the top of the top, I think, in recovery,
Mhm.
in that process, in that spiritual journey of recovery and getting your life back. Um, I think it's a lot about letting go of expectations and assumptions I made about myself, right? And frankly, about others. That's part of it. What expectations we know are premeditated resentments, right? When we have an
Mm-hmm.
expectation, sometimes we don't even know we have it. And we figure it out. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, wait, I'm offended or resentful because I had an expectation that a person would act
Yep.
the same way as I do. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so that's on me, right? However, like that's on me to work through that, let that go, realize that not everyone's going to look at people and situations and relationships like me. However, it doesn't mean that I give them the same access that they had before.
Right.
So unforgiveness was such a theme in my family of origin that I didn't know forgiveness was something people did.
Mm-hmm.
Really. I thought forgiveness was, I was taught it was for chumps and doormats.
Mm-hmm.
So when I realized that unforgiveness or not forgiving myself or others was holding me back in recovery and in my relationships, I started to think it was something I needed to look into. I mean, really, like in this marriage, I've only in this marriage have I said the words I forgive you, or felt like, or hearing those words I forgive you if I do something to upset my husband. I don't realize how powerful those words are. And I always used to laugh and think that only the Pope could say that, I forgive you. Like it, I really thought that's how I internalized the messages and lessons I got growing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so fascinating. Which this next topic about does forgiveness mean going back to the way things were, and especially with family, that I don't know, we could probably do a whole podcast on how do we deal with forgiveness with family and what does that look like moving forward. And they're your family. Aren't you supposed to just, no matter what they do, forgive them and pretend like nothing happened? And so this has taken years for me to get where I am today, but sadly often not, that things will go back to where they were. I'm not saying not forgive. I'm saying even when you forgive, things may not go back to the way they were. Even with family, new boundaries may have to be in place. I have had to learn that lesson over the years. Our job in recovery is to make sure we're safe.
Mhm.
That's our number one responsibility. So if there's abuse of any form, especially when children are involved, we know
Yes.
that there will need to be boundaries around relationships and contact.
Yes.
So you can wish no harm for someone, but do it from a distance. I think that's totally fine. And I will add that it wasn't until my 50s before I came to understand that setting boundaries with family was okay. That was something I didn't learn, that I didn't know before. I had to learn on
Correct.
my own that we don't just sweep things under the carpet and move on and swallow it down.
Right.
Up until, my 50s, I just followed tradition of
Mhm.
accepting family as they were because that was my upbringing. Maybe I even felt that it was a little bit of my spiritual responsibility.
Yes.
But that has changed for me, and I don't care who it is. If I'm not safe, you don't get the pleasure of my company.
Right. Right. I totally agree. Yep. Forgiveness I've learned, does not mean reconciliation or reconnection. It is something we do for ourselves, a chance to set boundaries, find peace, practice new behaviors, leverage a new recovery tools. And it's also a chance to trust God to be that vindicator, right?
Yeah,
It's not my job to
good
go
point.
and even the score or enact some sort of karmic retaliation. That's not my job. And I agree. I was brought up in a family that this is what you do for family. You step
Mhm,
in, you do for them even when they don't do for you. You
mhm.
it doesn't matter how you were treated, they're family. So you need to engage, or you need to go in and help them, or you need, even if you were totally, walked on and ignored your whole life, you need to help that person. It's like,
Mhm.
and I got it very confused with biblical principles.
Mhm.
And I was like kind of picking and choosing biblical principles of like what, totally ignoring that you reap what you sow principle. And
Mhm.
just looking at, let's do for others what they can't do for themselves. But that's not a, that's not the whole story. That's not the whole picture.
Yeah.
And so once I realized that I have an ability to choose how I engage, choose how I give someone access to me. And if they continually, if they say they want to change, but continually their actions belie that,
Mhm.
I don't have to continue to give them more chances. I can just step back, can have compassion, forgive them in my heart, and not re-engage with them.
I love what you said, that it's confusing to the brain. And it is confusing to the brain when these are your mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, cousins. It's confusing to the brain because the nuclear family, that's kind of how we're genetically programmed, that that's our unit. And it's also a safety issue too, that, and
Mm.
I mean, I got to forgive, because then maybe there's family outings I won't be involved
Right,
in, or it's part of my survival, it's part of my tribe.
right,
And now how will that look like? And I'm afraid to upset the apple cart, and I don't want to cause problems. And
right.
it comes with a whole bundle of issues. So you're right, it is confusing to the natural brain, especially to good people that just want to have, well, I mean, we all want to have nice relationships with
Course,
family members, right? That's our
of course,
goal.
of
So
course.
it's sad, it's a loss, and you want to do everything you can to protect that, but sometimes it's just not possible.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
that brings up the next big question of why bother?
Mm,
That's, the biggest question we'll probably ask this podcast, but many people view forgiveness as something that helps the person being forgiven. It certainly can make them feel better, but
yep,
forgiveness benefits you, or the forgiver, most of all. We hear
yes.
that philosophy a lot, and there might be some mixed feelings about that. So
Mhm.
in theory, I agree with that. I know it's true, but I just want to say again, I'm not perfect at this as much as I have perfected not wishing harm and setting boundaries to keep myself safe. I usually never get those warm fuzzies back for that person.
No,
I'm not actively trying to inflict harm, but my radar does go up. Sometimes I wonder if the warm fuzzies are even required of me in forgiveness, or is that okay? I don't know the right answer. Maybe Jamie knows the right answer and she can help me. But right now, this is where I am. And it wouldn't be an issue if people didn't keep ticking me off. And I think I would be better at uh, after all this practice, you would think I'd be better at forgiveness and how to do it right. But yeah, people still keep ticking me off. So I have to keep going through this process over and over again. But I don't know about you, but you think it's okay to not get the warm fuzzies back? Or does that mean I truly haven't forgiven? I really, listeners, please, if you have the answer to that
yeah,
question, I
we'd love to hear
sincerely,
your we'd love to hear
please
your
help
response.
me. I'm begging for help here. Help a sister out.
I don't, so no, the warm fuzzies, those, I mean, those are based on trust. Those are based on,
Yeah.
the reciprocal, right? That the person has engaged with you in a way that makes you trust them and you feel safe, right? You feel safe
Hmm.
around them. That's maybe that warm feeling that you're talking about. Um, I, for me, if other people are ticking me off, as you put it, I look at it, okay, what's my part? Because I always have a part. If somebody's ticking me off, I always have a part. And the part is usually I had an expectation that I wasn't aware of. And this person didn't meet it, or they crossed it, or whatever you want to say. And so that's on me. So I
Hmm.
can't change their behavior. I can't change how they chose to engage or not engage. I can change, okay, how can I now shift my expectation and expect less from this
Yeah.
person until
Hmm.
they show up differently again and
Hmm.
consistently again. I'm not a big lover of conflict, so for me, I will just, stew in my head about people, and they'll never know, and all that does is harm me, right? Spinning resentments harms me, and that's why, why I will take very specific action now. If I see the same behavior from people again and again and again, I will take action to have zero contact with them
Yeah.
if need be. Because I just don't see myself ever being safe with them. And
Yeah.
there's someone that I'm very, very close to, one of my nuclear family members that I have seen again and again and again this person make the same choices or worse,
Hmm. Mm.
to inflict harm or to inflict confusion and all kinds of manipulation and guilt tripping and psychological and emotional abuse again and again and again. And even this person has even recruited people in their life to inflict judgment and emotional and psychological, condemnation on me and other members of the family. And I'm looking at, I would love to be able to reconcile with this person. And a few years ago, I thought that was possible. And then the hits just kept on coming, right? It was just another version of the same kind of hurt. And I'm like, I just can't have this person in my life. And I looked at the period of time, it's been about 2 years, year and a half, where I've not had this person in my life, except for maybe a couple of phone calls, and they were very short. And I've thrived by not having this person in my life. I help out others who choose to engage with this person. I support them. I listen to them, but I won't engage with this person. I won't return a phone call. I won't call on holidays. It's just, I can look at them as a person who has been through a lot, has probably had some trauma for sure in their life, and also some physical trauma that we think might be causing some of these behaviors. There also could be, for sure, a mental imbalance going on. I can have immense compassion for this person. I can have a lot of wishing that things would have been different, or wanting that person to be a different person in my life or in the life of other people in the family. But they consistently show up in ways that are really hurtful and egregiously harmful. And I know that, okay, I can wish all the things I want for this person, but they're not there. So I have to look at the reality of, I accept that this person will never be what I need them to be, and therefore they will never get access to me the way that they want. It's just not possible.
So maybe we've answered my question about the warm fuzzies. Warm fuzzies are earned. That's a privilege, because I'm a good warm fuzzy giver. I would be like the best person to care for a friend. But so maybe that's just a privilege and has to be earned through trust, like you said. And I love that you're bringing up the point about, you had said something about looking at your response expectations.
Absolutely.
So
that's your part.
Smart.
If I'm disturbed, right? This is the recovery saying that I live by. If I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. That meant yes, the other person might have hurt me, but I had an expectation that they wouldn't, or I had an expectation that something was going to happen a certain way. And that's on me. I've got to let that go. It doesn't mean I need to give them access to me, but I still have to work on my stuff.
So smart.
Let's see. When I look over the benefits of forgiveness, right?
Yeah, let's do that.
The forgiveness helps us heal.
Yeah.
It really does. It helps us heal when we're able to say, I forgive them, or I can look at, again, when I say I forgive, what I'm actually doing is I'm accepting reality.
Yeah.
That what happened isn't what I wanted to happen. I'm accepting reality. I'm letting go of the things. I'm detaching from the behaviors and the people and the situations and the outcomes that I have no control over. And I'm saying, okay, now I do have control over my mindset, my self-talk, my prayer life, the way that I engage with that person. That's what I have control over. That's what I focus on. So when we can forgive, our emotional wounds will close, they'll heal. And it helps us move, right? From the forgiveness process helps us move from anger and resentment, which is just resistance, to reality. That's what anger and resentment are. Anger is denial of reality. Anger is a version of fear. It's fear of losing something you have or not getting what you want. So you're angry. And that's pushing against reality, right? Resentment is an expectation that was unmet, pushing against reality. So if we are able to use forgiveness, it allows us to let these things go before they seep into other areas of our lives. Have you experienced this, Paige?
Yeah, I agree with all of those things, because I hate feeling angry. It's uncomfortable. you can't think straight. It's miserable. It's like literal weight on your
Mhm.
shoulder. And I always feel better when I can get things worked out.
Yes,
And especially if the person is truly sorry, it's an easy forgive,
of
right? I
course.
mean, it may take some effort, but if
Right.
if you can see that they really are sorry, who doesn't want resolution in
Of
their
course.
life? Isn't that the
Yes.
ultimate goal, to just be resolute in your
Yes.
relationship? So, yeah, I agree. What about you?
Uh, for me, I really have to remember that I can pull that forgiveness lever, because otherwise I just because of family of origin and the way I grew up and the way that I dealt with things before without knowing that there was another way. I would just sit and spin in resentment or sit and spin in whatever I was feeling about that situation that I couldn't control or that person that I couldn't control. And then sure enough, I would just be filled with this cocktail of chemicals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that were really toxic for me. And I wouldn't know what it was like to just feel peace. Now that I know what it's like to feel peace, I want to feel that way more than I want to feel
Yeah.
those cocktails of resentments and anger and pushing against reality.
I love that you said that. I knew that you realized that you could pull the forgiveness lever. When you said that, I really was able to visualize that, because it was you taking control of the
Exactly.
situation. And
Exactly.
okay, I'm going to do this, and this is what it looks like. And I'm going to
Exactly.
start making changes from within. I love that example.
Good.
Interestingly, forgiveness can improve other relationships as well. Grudges and angry feelings can eventually overflow into your other relationships. You may have a struggle trusting again or even building new relationships. Have you ever been around someone who is filled with bitterness? I know I have, and it's yucky, it's
Mhm.
icky. They're dark, they're grumpy, everything is
Oh, yeah.
snarly and ugh. Those bitter people, they are miserable to be around.
Mhm.
Especially, I don't know if you've been around couples that have broken up or gotten divorced, and you literally hear all this angry spewing. It's horrible. It's not a good look on anybody. It's painful to be in the presence of someone who is constantly angry at the world, who thinks themselves a victim. And have you ever ridden in the car with an angry driver? They become downright vicious behind the wheel and get so mad at other drivers. They let it all out on the road, and you're just like, we're just going to Target, man.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the big deal? Why are we just so angry at, I mean, 10 different people you're angry at? I have a relative who just is cussing out every other person that they pass and making presumptions about their life
Yeah.
choices. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about you?
Unfortunately, I was raised by many people just like you're describing. That was my family of origin, not all of them, but a good chunk of them. The ones that I saw on a regular basis or interacted with on a regular basis had this bitterness, this unforgiveness, lots of grudges, surrounded me everywhere. And it might not have been at me, right? I'm not saying it was necessarily at me, although sometimes it was, depending on the situation, unfortunately. But most of the time it was about other people, right? It was about parents having grudges on each other, parent having a grudge on a grandparent, grandparent having a grudge on another parent, aunts, uncles having grudges on other people in the family. And certainly I've been the receiver of a grudge or two, and certainly of judgment and unforgiveness. But there was always this sort of anger in the home. There was always this sort of disappointment. There was resentment. It was just, not every family member, but the ones that I was around on a regular basis growing up, that's what I saw. I saw a lot of life is hard, it doesn't get easier. This person crossed me, woe is me. I'm angry, I have to do this. Something goes wrong. Oh, I'm even angrier now. Why can't I get a break? It was just this constant victimhood, martyrdom, the flipping of the coin back and forth between the two,
Hmm.
constant. And it got to the point where I just thought that was how people lived. I didn't know until I was in my 40s that you could come home to your spouse and smile when you walked in the door and have them smile at you and be happy to see each other. I had no idea. I thought that when you got home, it was like, oh, I got home and I got to make dinner. I got to clean this. I got to do that. I got to talk to them. Like, I just didn't, because again, it was what was modeled for me growing up. So I thought that that's just how people lived. I had no idea that there were other choices to make, that I had more control than I actually do, or thought I did.
Don't you think it's contagious too?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt. Mirror neurons are mirror neurons. I'm learning one way or another. Absolutely. It's contagious.
And so I can see where if you grew up with that negativity around you from a child, that you would take that into your workplace, into your relationships, take it to the mall with you, when you're working with, just checking out at the counter, that it's that paranoia too, that everybody's out to get me, and just, oh
yeah. And it's something that I'm very glad I'm releasing and letting go of, and I'm seeing clearly now, but it's a journey.
I agree, man. We've covered a lot. We've covered a lot today. This is such useful information, because it's interesting to me that you said, you grew up with this. This has been your experience all along. I bet there are people who are listening who can identify with what you're saying and are like having the opportunity to see the light for the first time and a pathway out of this. So, and that's part of our goal of this series, this forgiveness series, because we all struggle with it. There's no way you can be human and on this earth and not have had your feelings hurt, not have had to forgive or be forgiven. So that's why we are so devoted to this forgiveness series. And this will be the end of our part 1 today. And we have got so much good information to bring you. I hope you stick with us for the next few episodes. I think you're really going to be moved, and I think it may impact your life and your happiness level. Do you want to have, you want to say anything, any other parting words, Jamie?
I just, we're sharing a lot, right? Both of us are sharing a lot about our family origin. And I would release yourself, let yourself off the hook, so to speak. If you're noticing these patterns in your life and you're like, oh my gosh, this is me, or that was my family, or that's how I feel treated, or I'm, whatever. Let yourself off the hook, release yourself from the burden of carrying that around. When you know better, you do better. Now that you're becoming aware to the ways in your life that forgiveness has affected you or is affecting you, now you have a wonderful opportunity to do the work. To do the work of forgiveness.
It's freedom from prison, really.
It is. It really is freedom, and it's a choice on our part. It's something we have control over, and it really is not. We're not in prison. We have control over the outcomes here. For ourselves. We have control.
It's like inviting light back into your chest, your heart, your life.
Exactly.
Okay, guys, we will see you next time on our next episode of our series on forgiveness, and it will be entitled Forgiveness is for Chumps, in recognition of Jamie's famous one-liners. So I think you're going to love it too. So see you next time, guys. Bye-bye.
Take care, guys.